Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned to talk about 2026. We're talking about 2026 today, Roger, because this year is almost done. Less than a month to go, and then 2025 is over, which is fine with me because 2025 has been crap. I mean, everything outside of BookTube, anyway, has been crap, it feels like. But I've read some good stuff. I have read some good stuff this year. But now it's time to really start thinking seriously about next year and what I'm going to read and what I'm going to do on my channel. And am I going to be able to make more videos in 26 than I did in 25? We will see. But I've been thinking. So I originally had some plans. Recently I did this video, my 100 favorite classic books, which made me think about all of the classic books that I want to read. And there's a bunch of stuff that I want to read. Now, some stuff that are classics, I know I'm going to get to this year. For sure, I'm going to get to Homer. I'm definitely going to get to Homer, just because it's been too long since I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey. So I'm definitely at some point going to get to both of these books this year. These are the translations by E.V. Rue, which, are translations I like an awful lot. They were the first translations I read. They might be the translations that I read this year. If you think you have a translation that I should read, or if you have a particular favorite, let me know which one that is. I've read a few translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey. But yeah, definitely I'll be getting to these. I would like to get to, at some point, The Monk by Matthew Lewis. The Monk. About the naughty monk. Now, I have read this before, but it's been years since I've read The Monk. And so I would like to reread this and talk about it on the channel. Because it was certainly an entertaining book from what I remember. So I probably will definitely read The Monk at some point. But, there's some other things that I want to get to. But there is the, 500-pound or 1,000-pound, I should say, gorilla in the room. Which is, it was an elephant. It should be an elephant, but I'm just saying gorilla. Because I like giant apes, Roger, just like Robert E. Howard. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes, there is the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, which is the 500 book challenge. I was driving just yesterday down Solano Avenue in Berkeley. And I looked off over to my right as I was traveling south down Solano, and I saw my favorite bookstore, Pegasus Books. And I thought, I haven't been in that bookstore for, what has it been, years? I don't know how long it's been, but it's been a long time since I've been in that bookstore. Because of the dreaded 500 book challenge, which I'm on, the challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own before I'll buy any new ones. So it's been forever since I've been in that bookstore. And I was thinking, I wonder if that bookstore will even be open by the time, will it still be in existence by the time I'm done with this challenge? Other bookstores have closed in the time since I've started the challenge to now. And that was a depressing thought. And I was thinking, I've really got to get through this challenge at the expense of all other things. Now, there were some other things that I've really been interested in reading, like George Eliot's Middlemarch, which I keep hearing great things about. Everybody tells me how wonderful this book is. And then there are 2 Dostoevsky books I haven't read yet, believe it or not. There's Demons, which I've also seen called Possessed. I haven't read this. And then there's this idiot. I haven't read this either. But these are not books I could tear through, So I have to face the fact that these books are probably books that are going to have to wait. I'm much more likely to read, say, Devil Dog Squadron, Devil Dog Squadron, The Crimson Fog. I'm much more likely to read this, or say, A Handful of Hell by Robert F. Dorr. I'm much more likely to read that because of the 500 book challenge, because I really got to get this thing done. And so all of my energies, or most of my energies going into 2026, are going to be to tear through this challenge as quickly as possible, which means books that I can get through fairly quickly. And where am I at now? Just last night, I finished, this is my list, where I list the books that I read on the 500 book challenge. Highly technological list. Where are we at? 318. I finished The Moving Target by Ross MacDonald last night, and that book was great. So I've been thinking about what am I actually going to be reading going into 2026. Well, Ross MacDonald, for one. I really liked the Lou Archer series when I read it before years ago. And so I'm going to read the whole series. I don't know that I've actually read all of the Lou Archer books by Ross MacDonald. But The Moving Target was great. So I'm going to be reading that whole series. And so I'm going to be reading that. And I'm going to be reading some other detective stuff. Earl Stanley Gardner's Perry Mason. I enjoyed the first book in that series. So I'm going to continue on in that series because I have like 60 of those books. Mickey Spillane, I might read some of that this year. I've been recommended some other detective novels. The Nero Wolfe novels? I've been recommended those, but I don't have any of those, so I'm not going to read any of those. I can only read what I have after all. But I'm going to read some of that detective stuff. But a major focus, of course, is going to be vintage science fiction because I have so much of it lying around. So I'm really going to be going through the vintage science fiction, I hope, this year. Again, have piles of Westerns, and I always intend to read more Westerns. This is Rustler's Trail by Lee Florin. I always intend to read more Westerns outside of just June on the Range, but I'm always getting distracted by other things. But, you know, I've got a billion of them, and they tend to be quick reads. So, yeah, more Westerns this year. And, of course, there's the pulpy stuff. I've got lots of pulpy stuff. You know, I've decided I'm definitely going to be continuing to read Doc Savage. This is my next Doc Savage. The Man Who Shook the Earth. This is this month's Doc Savage. I've been reading all the Doc Savage novels in the order that they were originally published in the pulp magazines. And this is the 12th book that was published. The Man Who Shook the Earth. And that's an awesome cover. So I'm definitely going to be continuing to do that in 2026. Going to continue, what do the kids say? My journey. I'm going to be continuing my Doc Savage journey. I'm going to keep reading Doc Savage because Doc Savage is awesome. And of course, there's The Shadow. I'm probably going to be starting to read this probably today, actually. This is Double Z, The Shadow, because I've got to read more of that. And then there's other pulpy stuff. I've really been enjoying The Spider, so I'm going to be continuing to read The Spider. Then I just got some random stuff. Lone Ranger. Read the first Lone Ranger book. This is the second Lone Ranger book. Probably be reading this coming up this year. I've got random stuff like, you know, random Phantom novels. You can't get much more pulpy than this, so I'll probably be rereading that also this year. And also there are some ongoing reading projects like, there's Stephen King, reading every book by Stephen King, which I stalled out on after it because it was such a giant book. And it was a book that, you know, had some great stuff in it and some terrible stuff in it. And it was a challenge to read that book quickly. And so I stalled out. And the next Stephen King book I have is The Drawing of the Three. I believe, which is the next Dark Tower book. I think that's the next on the list. The problem with Stephen King at this point is that this is a point where Stephen King was just writing giant books. Like every book, no matter what it was about, ended up being long. I think it's right around this point when that started to happen. So I frankly don't know how much Stephen King I'm going to get through in 2026. I would guess probably not much, but we will see. Edgar Rice Burroughs is another author that I'm reading every book by. And the next book I have to read is The Efficiency Expert, which is one of the few Edgar Rice Burroughs books I've never read. And I've never read it because it's called The Efficiency Expert. And so I probably will be reading that very soon. I'll probably be reading that this month. And then I can go into 2026 reading a lot more Edgar Rice Burroughs because I want to talk more about Edgar Rice Burroughs. Also, I'll be rereading a bunch of Robert E. Howard because I love to read Robert E. Howard, my favorite author of all time. And I probably will be continuing to read a vintage Weird Tales every month. I have electronic copies of every issue of Weird Tales. And I've been reading Weird Tales every month for a few months now. And I've really been enjoying it. Weird Tales is awesome. Of course it is. But it's been really interesting to read the original magazines. So I'm going to continue to do that every month. I don't know, Roger, about your Cheap Old Book Club. I don't know about Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. We will see. I haven't decided whether we're going to keep doing that. It depends. I mean, does anybody read our Cheap Old Book Club books except for us? I don't know. I don't know anymore. But I might keep doing that. We'll see. I don't know. Haven't decided. But yeah, the 500 book challenge, man. Got to get through it. And it's not so much just because I really want to just run out and buy a ton of books. I probably am out of that habit. But I want the option, I would like the option to buy books once in a while, if I want to. So I got to get through this challenge. And I've been making good progress. For me, if I don't read at Criminale speed, I certainly don't read at Steve Donahue speed. If I read at Steve Donahue speed, this would all be done in like a week. But I don't. So my decisions about what I read are going to be probably, it's probably going to be due to the 500 book challenge. And then once the challenge is over, I could slow down and get back to a lot of the books that I would normally be reading right now, like Dostoevsky and a lot of other big, bulky classic books. I probably, after the 500 book challenge is done, I will just have like a year of reading mammoths, giant books that I've been intending to get to that I've had to avoid. Of course, there are things like Varney the Vampire, but at this point, I've been reading Varney, but at this point, I've just been reading Varney like in the bathroom, which is what Varney deserves, frankly. That's really what Varney deserves. So I'm going through this very quickly, very slowly, I should say. And I probably will still be reading this in 2027. So those are some of my thoughts. As far as BookTube reading events, I will continue to do those because they are fun. And in January, we've got Haggard January, which was created by Randy Ray, the literate Texan. And there's a whole group of co-hosts for that. And so I probably will be reading some H. Rider Haggard in January because H. Rider Haggard is awesome. And I might continue to read more Haggard in 26. We'll see. But there's also a few other reading events going on. And so the ones I'm going to be focusing on in 2026 are the ones, of course, that I do. June on the Range, of course. Always got to do June on the Range. And then there's Rocket Summer. Those are my two reading events. And of course, I'll go whole hog on those. But there's also Horror Mayhem in May. And I love that reading event, Horror Mayhem. which was created by the Bookish Bryants. And I will go full mayhem in May. Then there is possibly the greatest reading event of all time, Garb August, which I always take part in. But, you know, my whole channel is Garb August, really, if you think about it, Roger. every month could be Garb August for me, you know, particularly now while I'm on the challenge. So yeah, I'll take part in those reading events. I don't know that I'll take part in any other reading events other than those, but we'll see. If I think they would be fun, I will. But yeah, those are my thoughts for 2026. I'm gonna really charge into 2026 with the 500 book challenge, and I'm just gonna sprint my way through the 500 book challenge and really double down on that to escape the 1,000-pound gorilla that is the challenge. And I think that's everything I was going to talk about this morning. You have to excuse me, I'm very tired. I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning, Roger, and I could not fall back to sleep. I was just like, you ever do that? You wake up in the middle of the night and you're just like, and you can't fall back to sleep. It was one of those nights. And of course, by the time I started to fall back to sleep, it was time to get up. So I need to make some coffee. That's what I need to do. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.